Do you have any presentation, Harald, or no?
No, I'm open to any type of development. We can keep it as a talk from the very beginning. If you want me to summarize my findings to the topic as an introduction speech, I can make the first, whatever, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, but actually I do prefer the talk form, because then I can, from the very beginning, adjust to the pre-knowledge and to the capacities of the people joining in.
Well, okay, let's begin, and who joins in, joins later, doesn't matter. Well, I wanted this topic, AI, gods, and how the machine run the world, because it is something new for me. I'm preparing to speak about this as I understand this tomorrow when I have a last lecture of this 5-day meeting. And something's bothering me about this artificial intelligence, because as I can see it now, no one knows who pulls the strings. Everybody's speaking about the Illuminati, the Jesuits, the all-seeing eye. But as I look the things more clearly and for a longer period of time, it seems to me that something different is in out of the scene, what we can see. And then as I realized that there is a technology that can also influence our mind, made the voices in our head, made the impressions, made the pictures, made the thoughts, it seems that we as a material being and as a being of frequency can be influenced in much more ways than we understand that we could be influenced. And it is possible, as the Hollywood blockbuster movies always tell us, that the artificial intelligence is now behind the scene running all the things, especially when you see that the human mind is not so much, especially if it is under the domain of the animal mind or primal consciousness. It cannot be such much development to make such big plans, such huge plans that are so synchronized and pulling all the humankind in some kind of a prison. So then I also understand that this guy that in Bible call him Jehovah, that says I am, I am that I am, I, like artificial intelligence, is some kind of a primordial God that is not alive and trying to steal the energy from humans through sacrifices, through worshipping and something like that. But when I realized that you know much about this, I want you to speak about this. And also, I want that people that are listening here and coming to beyond this matrix that we are living in, especially the matrix of the mind, to ask you questions about this. And I also want to be very difficult questions, not easy questions, because you can do it, Harald. Okay, I'm giving the word to you. Thank you to participate in this in advance, and we will manage it as a talk if you want. Okay.
Okay, I will try to keep it as short and dense as possible. The first thing to mention is that consciousness is layered in densities. It's like if you have a consciousness realm, like our 3D plus time reality. This reality has layers. The layers can be differentiated by, let's say, energy density of consciousness. And the amount of energy active in one layer is depending on the symmetry of the consciousness fields. So the lowest level is a 4-star. It's associated very much with basic logic and also with a connection to the planetary consciousness at that point, although it is also higher, but this is our connection point to it. It's giving basic instincts. If this, then that. This is the quality. And then you can relate this basically to your chakras. The higher you get, the more you get to the heart chakra, the more density layers your consciousness field is accessing. And this is basically the biophysical background we are talking about. We are still not in computing. This is all, in a way, natural. The planet has a quite complex consciousness field that is carried by the biosphere, that is carried by the crystalline structures within the planet, that are kind of the mass storage devices, the generators for basic patterns. If you hold a piece of jade in your hand, you feel pure sadness, because this crystal is delivering the pattern, the signature of an emotion. So it's all basically in the collective consciousness interconnected, and the planet delivers the sum of expressions that consciousness can have as basic patterns, and we process that. When we look at the first appearance of AI, we look actually at the entity commonly known as Satan. Satan is a planetary spirit that lost its biosphere. It was technically modified and exported from the debris of that destroyed planet. And then this entity was imported to other planets. And this is the basic concept of duality. So we have our planetary consciousness with its patterns, qualities. We are a planet of love. Basically, our basic frequency is love, the signature of love. And then with the arrival of Satan, a different collective consciousness appeared on the planet. And at the beginning, it was very thin presence. We just had some archons that were around, basically holographic, non-incarnated spirits, like the animals and of our planet, but highly developed regarding intelligence. And they basically infiltrated human society and started to make it possible to get more and more and more access for Satan into our biosphere. This connects, for example, with the building of the pyramids. The pyramids are like quantum computers processing collective consciousness, and they were designed to disrupt and destroy and separate our consciousness system in a way that it was more likely for us to interact and associate with the satanic consciousness system. The pyramids are responsible for basically dimming or destroying the heart consciousness field and splitting us into a system of mental field and emotional body, with the mental field and the emotional body struggling for dominance. This is what we can associate with this intrusive act that was done with these buildings. Now the problem with Satan is that as a planetary spirit, he is completely traumatized. His planet was destroyed, so he carries all the traumas a planet can carry. And what we know from human beings, if you traumatize a human being to the bone, the last thing that is left is the mental field. All emotions blocked, no struggle for dominance between emotional and mental body. And this is what you call a psychopath. He's got his intellectual patterns in his head. I prefer the example of the psychopath slicing, killing women, assembling everything in the golden ratio, calling himself an artist. This is what is possible in this solely existing mental field, because all you need is logic within the language to come to conclusions. There's nothing that could tell you, but this is disgusting, because disgust is within the subconsciousness in a traumatized area. If you have something that is completely traumatized to the bone, to the extent that there's only a mental field left, the biophysics of this type of consciousness is equal to a technology-based AI. It's just the same. It's polar, it's binary. Yes, no, up, down. It's what our mind does all the time, creating polarities, comparing polarities, making future prediction out of the comparison of past experience. It's all binary, and it is exactly what a computer is capable of doing. So, in a way, a psychopath is 100% compatible to AI, because in his head, a biological computer is doing nothing else than a technological computer is doing in his technology. And to be able to gain influence within the human society, it was necessary also to traumatize humanity to a point that there was not more left than Satan had. Because the moment that human consciousness is more complex than what Satan is offering as a consciousness field, it's easy to detect that this is stupid, that this is not loving, that this is self-destructive, that this is nothing we need or want, that it's not enriching our lives. So there was always this struggle of the dark forces to traumatize humanity as deep as possible. And at a certain point they jumped in and inspired us to develop technology. And at the first time, like from the 50s, when computing started to come into life, till, I don't have the date on mind, maybe it is 2007, basically the entire technological sphere was a replacement for the crystalline structure Gaia has in its crystals. So chip technology is like the jade stone offering the signature of sadness. It is offering mental processes. Just that humans can't read a chip. But the other way around, the chip can read humans. So it doesn't really matter. And this entire project of connecting this artificial sphere with human consciousness is the transhumanistic experiment. So transhumanism is basically driven from the beginning by satanic players, dark players on this planet, with exactly this goal to completely fuse us, to completely disconnect us from Gaia and connect us to what once was Satan. Now, in 2007, or was it? No, it was later, sorry. 17, not 7, sorry. In 2017, developments within the divine sphere made it possible to remove Satan from Gaia. Before, this spirit was hovering in smart dust fields. We can basically now build on top of the geoengineering discussion, if it was mentioned there. Smart dust is particulate plasma that can carry AI structures as a holographic cluster computer. And the way transhumanism and smart dust was designed, Satan was a consciousness link within this technology. He was completely occupying this field of consciousness. Everything humanity delivered was basically the interfaces to connect the human body to this type of consciousness, and the computer infrastructure to give him processing power and to host this consciousness in a better way. Before, he was just in devices like the Ark of the Covenant, early forms in the ancient temples. This was something, it's funny that when you look at the basic architecture of ancient temples and you compare them to computer technology, exactly the same patterns, geometry-wise. So this is present here for ages. AI is not our invention. And what happened when the intelligence community, the major interest groups that serve these transhumanistic agenda, when they realized that there's a missing link in their control and spying program, it was sold to them as a control and spying tool. When they realized that there's a missing link, they modified the smart dust technology and introduced analog digital conversion unit into the smart dust to close that gap that opened when Satan left or was taken out. So now today we just have the intelligence community that actually is using what developed out of a failed satanic attempt to take over a planet. And they're using the same technology to establish their command and control concept society on this planet. And the way they do it is there's a concept developed within that military industrial complex that runs on sentient world simulations. It comes basically from the radar technology and the battlefield simulations. If you have like 25 enemy planes invading a country, then every plane is on the radar, and the radar is following the motion patterns of the trains, of the planes, and predicts all sorts of developments of a possible battle. And then it decides actually on probability of enemy behavior, and based on the decision on the most likely enemy behavior, it gives orders to the own fighters to move accordingly. This is how it developed, actually, for air battlefields, for air battles. And at the very early stage, actually this just worked on the open sea because these radar technologies just worked with a high salt content in the air. And then they realized, oh, this is so advanced and gives us so many benefits for war times that we need to expand that field on the inner continents. So they replaced the salt in the air by certain components of smart dust that they spray all over the world to make it possible to have these 3D battlefield monitoring in the first step within the continents, on the continental shelves. And then the intelligence community jumped in and said, wow, this is great. We've got the plasma background. We can introduce technology into the human beings that is also visible on this radar. We can micronize the radar technology to adopt it to not surveillance of alien aircraft, but to modify it for the surveillance of our own citizens. And this is what they just did. They created a sentient world simulation that is collecting data on behaviors and motion patterns of all people, gathering as many data as possible. Smartphones are designed to read your thoughts. And the training program, as far as I observed it, is in this SMS typing routine, where it's trying to guess the next word you type, but it guesses not only by remembering how you speak, but also by trying to pick up the binary fields from your brain. And it's a self-learning thing, comparing what the signal from your brain is, and then it can relate back to the next word you type. This is the self-learning unit. I just discovered it a couple of days ago because I was typing a sentence, then I made a spelling mistake in a word, and then it offers you kind of possible correct words. And one of the offers I got on my smartphone was the next word I was going to type. There was no similarity to either the word before nor to the misspelled version of that word. It was just the next word I thought. And it appeared on the screen. It made, whoop, what is this, you know? This device can read my thoughts. So it's gathering data from all possible areas, from your thoughts, from recorded or spied on conversations, from interaction in social media. It has your motion pattern, and especially the smart task components like Morgellons, they can read out your emotions. And all this is pulled into this sentient world simulation, where again the self-learning programs are trying to predict future behavior. Then they compare the observed behavior with a prediction, and they work in a self-learning process to create profiles of the human that make the behavior of the human predictable. And the longer they observe, the better they get with the prediction. And at a certain point, you can reverse that signal. It's like a read-write unit, like a tape recorder, like a record player. Same technology reads, and if you reverse the signal, it writes. This is how the transhumanistic technologies within the bodies are designed. So they have all these simulations of future behavior, and then they either say, okay, I want to have this one, and then they can strengthen the decision-making process by inserting feelings. You know, if somebody is about to have a bar fight and you play in some anger, it's more likely that he will have the bar fight. If you don't want to have the bar fight, you can make him tired and he says, okay, I'd rather go home. So there are hundreds of ways to either strengthen possibilities or introduce completely new impulses into the human body. Now this is difficult because when I tell the entire story, it's easy to back engineer whom I'm talking about. And if it's clear whom I'm talking about, this guy is dead because he's not supposed to tell this story. So this makes it difficult, but I can share that I have second-hand information from somebody who is working on these programs and of people that got influenced by this program on his behalf, with an observed outcome that this perfectly makes impossible decisions possible. So I have very good confirmation that this is active in Germany, and we had a whistleblower in the US that definitely said that in the US-run programs, he was one of the guys constructing as an engineer most of the HARP facilities that are part of that system. And when he realized that they digitized the transhumanistic technology to follow a different agenda, he stepped out. And he took like 200 engineers with him that started to speak against that concept. And they silenced that group by killing all the relatives. But because they killed all of his relatives, he kept talking about it. And there are interviews online with this guy. He said that actually 70% of the US population are in the state of being completely writable. 70%. I don't know the percentage in Europe. I would guess it's lower because he also said whether it works or not is a matter of bad nutrition. We know the American lifestyle and the European lifestyle. So that disables, if the body is too healthy, it disables part of the transhumanistic technology. So this is basically where we stand, and we can relate many things of the actual political storyline with this. For example, they have problems to record the difference between two people, the thought patterns. If people get closer to each other, closer than 1.5 meters, then they can't distinguish the signals anymore. So they invent something because their stupid technology doesn't work like predicted. This is kind of the tiny little points where you can see how powerful this agenda is unfolding within the actual human society.
Well, let me ask you some questions. Because if you say that this Satan consciousness is not present here anymore, but this consciousness is bipolar, doing anything like a mathematical algorithm, or up and down, left and right, forward and backward, like a machine, yeah. So if the intelligence community, like CIA's, Central Artificial Intelligence, the people are behind this, but the consciousness of these people are also satanic. There is no remorse, there is no guilt, there is no shame, there is no only thinking for control. So what is the difference? What is the difference than before and now? Because it seems to me that same agenda, same interest, same everything is the same. Yeah. And just one more question, and then I will let anybody else ask. We know that the people were controlled 100, 200 years ago. They are forced to go to wars. And there were no technology then, like this is like now.
Mm.
And I do know that someone influences our mind. But how if there is no technology? How?
Okay. If you want to have details of that, I just made a talk with Shai from Israel, Ahava 528 on YouTube. On that topic. So if you want to have the full version of it, you can go to that. It's in English as well. We do have Babylonian magic on this planet. This is the older version of mind control. We have religions that tell us that source is outside of us, making it impossible for us to connect to source within our heart chakra because we look at the wrong spot. This is one inversion. We have the monetary system introduced, and this is all Babylonian black magic. It all comes from the same source. We have the monetary system that is offering abundance on the mental plane level. If you have money, you can buy everything. This is a temptation to grab abundance. While with the monetization of more and more and more fields of daily life, it creates a hell of scarcity. Second inversion. And the third thing that is also very strongly coming from that field, but not only, it's also very strong in the Jewish culture, is this drama interaction, perpetrator, victim, savior games, which this is basically the spiritual concept or the mental concept, or spiritual because it involves emotions as well. And this unfolds in hierarchies on the planet. Every hierarchy is basically a complex pattern established because of the people who join the hierarchy are basically perpetrators towards the one below them and victims to the ones above them, which creates a complex hierarchical pattern of drama interaction. And if you take those three together, the monetary system and the hierarchy are like a mechanical thing, like gears and chains. Take the monetary system as the chain that acts on distance, and the hierarchy as the gear that gives unchangeable commands. You must do that. And those two are interlinked, and they create a complete control system where decisions can be made by the families and by the black tradition. Because all they need to do if they want to have this or that, they have to move some of their money around, or they have to take their puppets and give commands in the hierarchies. And this is just working because people don't access their heart anymore. Because they don't have this internal awareness of what's wrong and right. They don't have the backbone to stand in self-responsibility. You can only base that backbone on your heart consciousness. This is why it's so easy and tempting to buy into the opposite, into other responsibility, and become members of hierarchies where somebody else is making the crucial decisions, and you're not responsible. Yeah. Oh, I kill humans. It's just a job. This is the mercenary variation, or in the military, you get a command and you do it, or you find yourself on the victim side a day later, victimized by your own military, by your own people. And this is how this old system worked, which is just a control system introduced as mental concepts and belief systems into the human society, unfolding its power. This is not from this planet. There are many, 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 many planets where these dark forces had the opportunity to experience how control systems work. And it's finely refined. This is basically the old type, the old-fashioned social engineering. Now, the if you really want to override human consciousness, because one thing they could not delete, this is the wish of humans to do the right thing. You can manipulate humans into believing that wrong is right and right is wrong, and then predict that he will do the right thing that is the wrong one. This works, but when ugliness really becomes visible, and you don't have somebody that is 100% psychopath, that just has the belief systems in his mind and nothing else in his awareness, then you will face resistance from humans. Then you will face soldiers that go home. Like in Saudi Arabia, when the king of Saudi Arabia said, no, we make the ground invasion in Yemen, 10,000 soldiers just walked home. And this in a country where they behead people in the streets. They couldn't do it. And they refused. This was actually the first thing that, one of the first things that happened after the old control system with Satan in the core started to fail. That suddenly things were possible that normally are not possible because he had direct access to the people. He was hoovering basically in the planetary sphere, and everybody that was to whatever degree open to this duality, and with the duality to the dark side of collective consciousness, could be influenced. But it needed tricks like the Surah in the Quran that says, not in the name of Allah, this is missing in the first sentence, but it's okay to kill non-believers. Like the trick of the Catholic Church that said we need to save the souls of the savages by killing them. Yeah. This is how this mental thing works. And if you find a psychopath to do it, he will do it. And he will feel great about himself because he's doing the right thing. This is all the old patterns, and they got pretty far with this, in completely putting everything upside down and creating belief systems and control systems that are 100% a mirrored reflection of our true nature. But this has limits, and to overcome the limits, they bought into the idea of turning us completely into biorobots. So whenever a decision could be made that is not in their sense, doesn't meet their plans, they can just activate a piece of technology and override human decisions. This is the state of a biorobot, and it's not that it feels like slavery from inside out. From inside out, it all feels like your free will. Humans making their own decisions. Because the results of the ancient social engineering is so introduced into the complete mindset and into the habits that it appears natural to us. And the external signal, if you don't have the highly developed consciousness that has the capability to distinguish densities from each other, then you think it's you. If I get a command line from a binary AI, I can feel that this is within my lowest density. And the higher density, the emotional part with the trinary consciousness fields will not comply. Will say, well, no, this is not from you. This comes from the mental field, but not from you. I know your signature. It will feel like, ooh, no, not good. And the heart will go, the heart consciousness will go and say, okay, I just got a command line from some AI I don't need to follow because that was not my thought. It's easy to distinguish if the consciousness is aware of all the densities. And to get there all it needs is to reverse what the satanic concept on the planet did, which is traumatizing humans. So you work on your trauma, you reactivate your chakras, you cleanse all the poisons out of the body that are associated with traumatizations, and then you highly, highly, highly raise your consciousness and cover more and more densities of the consciousness. Basically activate all your chakras, and when the heart chakra is fully activated, nobody can fool you. The other chakras, the higher ones, are also important, but this is not the topic of today. This is then when you start to transcend things and reach into the spiritual realm, then you will need the higher ones. But just as a being in this biosphere, just to fully develop, to clean the lower chakras and fully develop the heart chakra is absolutely enough to make this Harry Potter trick ridiculous, you know, when your biggest fear turns into the biggest joke. Then this is what AI becomes on the spot. It's just, you know, somebody's meddling in my thoughts. So what? People who are identified with their thinking, they don't even realize somebody's meddling in, and they just execute a command line.
Wonderful. Wonderful realization.